Hello everyone, Dusty here. I'm excited to announce that KitchenTableMeta is collaborating with Popo's Kitchen, a new site specializing in Dragon Ball Super singles. They have everything from Set 1 tournament promos to Union Force and even Dash Pack promos. And if that wasn't enough, you can even trade in your old cards for credit. Do you have a playset of Sensu beans you're not using? Turn them into credit and buy that shiny Jiren. Don't forget to tell them Dusty sent you by using the code KitchenTableMeta at the checkout to save 10% on your entire order. Hey guys, Dusty here, bringing you my first deck profile for Union Force, Mono Blue Zamasu Control. Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to Kitchen Table Meta. Now today is the first Union Force deck profile I'll be doing, and I'm doing it on one of my favorite decks of the new set, and that's Mono Blue Zamasu Control. Now this is a really fun deck, and I really like control decks anyway. I played them a lot in the other card games I played, and so I always kind of gravitate to those type of decks. And so this is like, it's seriously one of my favorite, the first deck I picked up, and it's actually kind of funny how it started. Essentially, my group that I play with was on Cell. We were on Cell Control. That's a deck that we were building for to take to the most recent event we played in. And so we were trying to figure out decks to beat that deck. And so I was like, you know what? Zamasu seems pretty good against that deck. He can run a bunch of indestructible threats, and that seems like that would give Cell a lot of hardship. And so I built it real quick, and we just played it, and I just really quickly fell in love with the deck. I thought it was super fun. I loved how it run, and I've just been tweaking it ever since. Now, my other teammate, John Tata, took this to the Dream Wizards case tournament last weekend, and I'm getting 9th place with it. And then we've done some more tweaks and adjustments to it for this video, and so this is the most recent version of the list. Now, something different I'll be doing in set 2 that I didn't do in set 1 is I will continue to update the lists if needed. So if we come up with a breakthrough or a way that we think this deck would run better, I'll update this list on the website. So if you go down to the link description below, you can go to the Kitchen Table Meta website, and the deck list will be on there. And I'll also have like a little thing that'll be like updated, and it'll tell you what day it's been updated, and that way you always have the most recent list. This will allow me to put out more deck profiles without feeling like I'm leaving you guys behind. Like, because a lot of times I want to put tons of testing into these decks, and I really feel like I kind of I let you guys down if they're not tuned enough. And so if something ever happens, I can essentially approve the deck and get them to you. But now, anyway, let's forget about that stuff. Let's talk about the deck. That's what you guys are here for. That's what I'm excited to talk to you guys about. So let's jump right in. So the first card is Fuse Zamasu, and that's our leader card. This is a brand new leader for the Union Force, and it has 10,000 attack, and he has a really neat front side ability that says active main once per turn. Choose one card in your life and place it in the drop area. If the card you placed in the drop area with this skill was blue, draw one card. Awaken when your life is at 2 or less. That's 2 or less. You may draw 2 cards and flip this card over. Now, this is a really unique leader in a couple different ways. The first, most apparent way is that he awakens at 2 life, which is kind of a little bit of a disadvantage for sure. And we'll get into that a little bit more once we talk about his awaken side. But this can, pose a problem against hand destruction decks because while you have a way to awaken yourself, you awaken so late that they can a lot of times still pressure your hand enough to make it pretty hard for you to win the game. Now, the reason why I guess your plan against hand destruction though is that you do draw a card every turn with this ability, and they don't really put a lot of pressure on your leader anyway. And so a lot of times it's kind of a stalemate. Like they're doing some things, or usually taking some cards out of your hand, but you can usually just refill them off of your ability and with the awakening ability. Now, the other thing that's really cool about this leader is he really rewards you for playing mono energy caller. So in this deck, that's why it's mono blue. This skill is just too powerful to essentially give up, right? And so like that's one of the big things about this deck. When I really started getting into it, I thought about maybe splashing green into the deck or splashing yellow into the deck, and it just really felt bad every time I used this ability and didn't get a blue card, and so I ended up staying at blue. Now again, don't let this deter you from trying a different color yourself. I just think it's more efficient if you just stick with the mono blue plan. Now, once Fuse Zamasu finally awakens, he turns into Absolute God Fuse Zamasu. Now, this is a 15,000 attacker that has an insane permanent ability that we're going to get into very quickly here. And it says, if damage is inflicted to your life, place 5 cards from the top of your deck in the drop area. Instead, and then it says, in little quotation marks, it says 10 cards if you are dealt 2 damage. And so, again, there's a couple things I want to talk about this card. Number one, I know early in the set 2 reviews, we weren't sure what this meant. Like, we knew, 1 was 5 cards, 2 was 10 cards. cards, but then we didn't know if, if 3 would be 15 or 3 was still just 2. One of the theories going around was that because you only had 2 cards left, you couldn't actually take 3 damage, and so you would just mill 10 cards off the top. But after the FAQs came out, after we started getting more word back from Bandai, it is 10 cards for 2, and then 15 for 3, and then 20 for 4, and so on and so on. So that is 100% how it's worded. And so but again, that might seem like a downside, and it is a little bit. Like, it's not obviously not as good as taking 3 and only milling 10, but it's still a very powerful ability because this essentially gives Zamasu sometimes 10, 11 life extra. I mean, not extra, but like total. And so it's, I guess, 3 or 4 extra life, which is very, very powerful ability, especially for a control deck, because you want to stay alive. And a lot of times in this game versus a lot of the aggro or mid-range strategies, the control decks are often like 1 or 2 turns too slow, right? Like, you'll get set up, you'll be good, and then they'll play out a triple striker or a double striker, and they'll dump their hand and they'll get you like right at the last second. And this deck really kind of stops that from happening. And again, we'll get into it a little bit more, once we talk more about the cards. But the last thing he does is when he does attack, you do draw a card. And again, the thing to remember about this deck, and the reason why it's so powerful, is because of this ability, because of the milling cards off the top 10. You want to make sure that you can get down to 1 life in your discard. I'm sorry, in your life total, because the big mistake that a lot of Zamasu players make is they awaken right at 2, and they essentially lose a life. Because what happens with this leader is that once your deck is gone, so like once you've milled out your deck, and as soon as you have no cards in your deck, you lose the game. And so you don't actually ever lose the game from losing a life when you're awakened. You only lose it from essentially your deck being discarded out, because this isn't a May ability. Every time you take damage, you have to do this effect. If you can't mill all the cards, you just lose the game. And before we get into this, I'm sorry, I'm using a term that some of you might not be familiar with. When I say mill, it's a term from Magic, and it just means taking a card from the top of your deck and put it into your discard pile or your drop area. So when I say mill 2 or mill 3, it just means you take 3 cards, put them in your drop area. Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of use terms that you might not be familiar with. And so again, that's the real strength of this leader, is we want to get down to 1 1 life in our pile, and we want to awaken, and then we want to, hopefully have a big enough deck to survive until some of our bigger threats win us the game. Now, one more tip I'll give you before I move into the actual battle cards of this deck is this is a deck that really rewards you for being very aware of how many cards are in your deck. And whether you're playing Zamasu or you're playing against Zamasu, it's very important to keep track of that number. You're allowed to ask your opponent how many cards are in their deck. You're allowed to keep track of it, and make sure you do, because if your opponent is at 10 cards left in his deck, then attacking him with a triple striker could make you win the game, or vice versa. If you only have 10 cards in your deck, make sure that you save those counters, those negates, to stop triple strike attackers, so you don't have to take those 15 cards. Okay, so let's move in. That's enough about the leader. Let's move into the battle cards. We have some really cool cards in here that we really started testing and that I'm really excited about. So we'll start out with the 1-drops. First up, we have Universe 10 Supreme Kai Gawasu. Now this is the new 1-drop card that comes in for Uniforce. This is the 1-cost 5,000 attacker that says when you play this card, look it up to 3 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 1 god among them, and add it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. Now the important part to remember about this deck is that this is a god-based deck. We run a lot of gods. And so this guy has been an all-star for me in my testing. He's been super good. He gets me, parts of my combo. And so again, what we'll talk about a little bit later is that our big win condition for this deck is a 10-drop Zamasu. And what he does is he has Unipatora, and he can Patora for 7 instead of 10 if you have a Goku Black and a Zamasu. And so this deck plays a little bit like a combo deck, and in that you need to have a Goku in play, a Goku Black in play, and a Zamasu in play. And this guy can really help you get that combo when you don't happen to draw it throughout your turns. He's also good for an early drop against aggressive decks. You can play him out. You can go get your Whis that you need for ramp. You can get your Piccolo card. That's another big thing about this card. Piccolo is a god, so that's something every time I get Piccolo with this card, my opponent's always surprised to find out that Piccolo is a god, and he's a really good target for this card. So this card's really good early game because it gets you those threats you need to maybe ramp. He's also really good against aggressive decks because he allows you to combo, which you can save life, which is great. He's just really good early game. He's really good late game to help you find your in-game threats, and so he's just really been an all-star in the deck. Next up, oh, I'm sorry, we run 4 of those guys too. Next up, we run 3 Bulma God Tempter. Now, I used to run 4 of this in the deck, but I really found that I didn't want to get a second one of these. I feel like the first one was awesome. I really want the first one, but the second one just seemed kind of lackluster. I usually use it as energy, which is never a bad thing. If it's really important to get it turn 1, then running 4 is okay. Card will talk about objections like that. I don't want the second, third, or fourth, but the first one's so important that we have to kind of sacrifice and run 4 anyway. But however, with Bulma, I decided to run 3 because, playing her on 2 is fine as well. So if we wait and play her on the objection turn, so let's say we don't get her to the first turn, we play out our Gawasu, we get our card. We also can, use our life ability, on our front to try to get her, try to dig for her as well. Also, her main purpose is to get us Whis out of the deck. And while that's really important because we really need to get that ramp going, it's really important to realize that we have other parts of the deck that can get Whis as well. We're not reliant on Bulma, and so we can use Gawasu to get Whis. We can also just use Zamasu's ability as well. And so this is very important to remember. While I think Bulma is super powerful, I think cutting 1 is right. However, if you really want to run 4, that's also really good too. All right, next up, we have Boost Attack Piccolo. This guy is obviously an all-star in any blue deck. He's our 0-cost 10,000 combo card for the blue guys, so we're going to run 4 of him. Another thing, like I talked about a little bit earlier in the video, he is a god, and so this is amazing because we can get him with Gawasu late in the game if we need to, have a card to survive. He's just a very, very good card. We're going to run him regardless because he's so powerful, but it's also neat that he works so well with the deck because he is a god. So again, Boost Attack Piccolo, amazing card. All right, next up, we have Warrior of the Gods, Goku Black. Now, we only run 3 of this guy, which might seem kind of weird for a lot of players because he is very strong. And I don't think he's that strong of a card, but he's very important in the deck, is what I meant to say. And in that, we need him to be able to Unibatora into our 10-drop. And so I've seen a lot of lists run 4 of him. Me and John talked a lot about this after the event, and we just felt like this is really the worst card in the deck. Something else to remember about this guy is that he doesn't have Indestructible. A lot of people think that he does. His ability says if Zamasu is in play in your battle area, this card cannot be KO'd by your opponent's card's skills and does not leave battle area due to skills. This doesn't mean combat. And so if you attack with this guy and your opponent wants to attack back and target him, they can kill him. So he doesn't have Indestructible like most of the Zamasu threats. And so he's not quite as strong or as malleable as the Zamasu cards. And again, he has 10,000 power, so he really can't pressure that much either. And so literally you only run this guy to have essentially a Unibatora target. Me and John's talked about maybe running 2 instead. I think that's maybe a little too less. I think you want 3 so you can make sure you can get one by turn 7 so you can play him out, for the Unibatora. But still, a very necessary card for the deck, but not a very powerful card. So again, make sure you run some number of these guys. It's really important for the combo, but don't expect this to be like an all-star on the card because he is kind of lackluster. Okay, next up we have the 4-cost Zamasu, which is the Almighty Beam Fuse Zamasu. Now this is a promo card, but it is the promo card from the special pack, so it's very easy attainable, and it's very strong threats as well. And so what it does is it has Unibatora 2 blue, and it's set for Goku Black and Zamasu, which means if you have a Goku Black or Zamasu, you can combine those guys and play this on top of it. Now, you do combine them in active mode, so that's very important to remember. So you can't attack with those threats and then Unibatora ready them and then put this on top. So it is important to remember that. I notice a lot of players missing the active part of that ability. Next up, he has auto ability. Says, when you play this card, if your leader card is Zamasu, choose up to 1 of your opponent's battle cards and place it in the bottom of their deck. And so essentially, it's essentially like a pseudo Beerus. You play this out, you choose one of their battle cards, they have to take that card and put it on the bottom of their deck, which is very, very strong. And again, it's not quite as strong as the Beerus ability because the Beerus ability does KO it. And this card doesn't have double strike like Beerus, but the things this card does do is it opens up Unibatora for your 10-drop Zamasu, and it also in a pinch can be Unibatora to maybe save something. So it doesn't quite seem as good as Beerus, and really it isn't in a vacuum, but for this deck I think it actually runs a little bit better than Beerus for the long-term plan. So because of that, we do run 4 of this card. Very, very strong card, and honestly, a lot better promo than I originally thought it would be when I first saw it. Next up, we have Energy Boost Beerus. Now this is the 4-cost 2 blue, 20,000 attacker. Now this is a 3 cost, we run 3 of these in the deck. Now this is the double strike. When it comes to play, if you have 5 or more energy, you choose one of your opponent's threats and you KO that. Now this is an extremely strong card, you know, something that I don't have to talk a lot about because this is a staple from set 1. It's continuing to be strong in set 2. It's a god, which is extremely, extremely important because you can search it out with Gawasu and a lot of other things as well in the deck. Just a super strong card. And this is a control deck. And so for it to be effective, we need to make it until turn 7 or 8. And this is one of the cards that really helps us do that. Now, one of the big threats against this deck is double striking cards. We hate seeing those cards because it makes us mill 10 cards off the top of our deck, which can be very devastating. And so cards like Energy Boost Beerus and the Zamasu we just saw really helps us deal with those cards and lets us survive into the late game as well. All right, next up, we have Whis, the Resting Attendant. Now, this is the 4 cost, 2 blue, 10,000 attacker that when you play this, you take the top card of your deck and put it into the energy row. Now, this is a very, very important card to the deck because we want to ramp to 7 as 7 energy as fast as possible, guys. And so this is extremely important to play this out on with 4 energy. So this is usually like your turn 3 if you get the objection turn and everything works out the way you want it to. Now, something to really remember about this card in the deck, just in general, is that you really need to keep track of where your 10 cost cards is. We only have 2 of them in the deck, and I'll talk a little bit more about this once we actually get to the card, but we only run 2 in the deck, and so a lot of times one can be in your in your life, one can be in your deck, or maybe both are in your life, both are in your deck, and so you really need to use the Bulma to kind of keep track of where those guys are. And so Whis is very important because you need it to get your energy, but you have to be very careful. If you have only 1 left in your deck, let's say you use your Zamasu's ability early, you flip a card over and it happens to be your 10 cost card. You have to be very careful of Whis and not play it out and just use the top card and just happens to be your 10 drop. You know, it can really put you in a bad situation. So just kind of keep track, monitor where those 10 drops are when possible, and you know, be very careful when you play this card. Now, most of the time, 99% of the time, we're just going to play this out on 4, but just like I said, just be very careful with that. If you maybe can't play it out until turn 5 or something, just make sure that you use this card wisely and don't just slam it out whenever you might only have 1 left in your deck, 1 10 drop left in your deck. So very strong. Oh, and one more thing I want to say about this. We do run 3 of this guy. The main reason why is because, you know, in a perfect world, we would run 1 of these in our deck. And I've seen a lot of people talk about, like, why don't you just run 1? The big reason why, guys, is because if this is in our life, it can really put us in a disadvantage. And so that's why we run 3. It gives us a pretty good chance that all 3 of them aren't going to be in our life, and that we can definitely play this out on turn 4, because, or turn 3, I guess, if you use objection, which is very important for the strategy of this deck. So that's why we don't run 1. Next up, we run 2 Zamasu the Invincible. Now this is the 4 cost, 2 blue, 15,000 attacker with Indestructible. Now if you guys aren't familiar with what Indestructible is, since this is the first Indestructible card in the deck, essentially it says this card cannot be KO'd by your opponent's card skills or battle and does not leave the battle area for any reason. So essentially, nothing can get rid of this card. The only thing currently that can get rid of Indestructible cards, guys, is a 7-drop Zeno-sama, that when it comes to play, it negates all skills, and then you shuffle everything back into your deck. That's the only thing that currently gets rid of Indestructible. And so these cards have the potential to be extremely, extremely strong. Now, we only run 2 of these guys. And the big reason why we only run 2 of these guys is because this card's pretty lackluster. And it also kind of goes against what we're trying to do with our strategy. I think John put it perfectly when he said this isn't an aggressive deck. This is a ramp/control deck with a little bit of combo elements into it. So essentially, if we're running the Zamasu leader, which we are, this guy only costs 3. And so what we really want to do with this guy is we want to play him out. You know, essentially we want to go turn 1, play out, you know, our Bulma or Gawasu. Turn 2, objection into another Bulma or Gawasu. The next turn, play out Whis, you know, preferably into another 1-drop if possible. The next turn, play out this Zamasu and the Goku Black. So we want to play out the 2-cost Goku Black. And then the next turn, we play out our big 10-cost threat. Now, nowhere in that scenario do we attack with Zamasu or put a lot of pressure on Zamasu. If we have to play this guy out on turn 3, we're super far behind. That means we missed our objection or we missed our Whis, so it can really put us in a bad spot against most decks. And so this is not an aggressive deck, and in that kind of, you know, mid-rangey, aggressive deck style, you know, Zamasu, if you would happen to be running something like that, this card is an all-star, obviously. But in this deck, this is literally just a Zamasu target for us to Unipator into that cannot be eliminated, and really makes our turn 6 or 5 very, very strong. So that's why he's in the deck. We used to run 4, and like me and John said, it just kept feeling like this card just wasn't good enough. We'd play it out, we'd put pressure on our opponents, and then, you know, we would just, you know, essentially evolve them into Batora. But then it seems like every time we had to play this guy out to put pressure on our opponent, that means we weren't ramping, and so we just fell so far behind from that the aggression wasn't worth missing the ramp, and so that's why we want to run 2. Next up, we have my favorite card in the deck. This is a little bit of tech that I put in here for certain different matchups, but this is Determined Striker SSB Son Goku. Now, this is the 4-cost, 1 blue, 20,000 attacker that has counterattack. Play this card and negate the attack. And so when your opponent attacks you, you're allowed to play this card out of your hand and negate the attack. It says permanent, when activating this card counter, if you have 3 or less life, you may place 2 Saiyan from your hand in the drop zone. If you do so, reduce the cost of this card by 3 for the duration of the turn. And so essentially what this means is that if you have 3 or less life, guys, you can you know, discard 2 Saiyans from your hand and then you know, play this out for 1 energy. Now, something to remember about this deck and is that all of your Goku Blacks are still Saiyans. And so you can discard, you know, your 2-cost Goku Black or the 6-cost one that we're getting into it here if you need an emergency negate, which sometimes happens. This is also a fantastic card to play off of Zeno button, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so that's why I put 2 of these in the deck. Just sometimes this deck needs another counter, and it's really important to make it through those turn 6 because you really want to, you know, tap out on your turn 7 and play out your 10-cost Zamasu, and then you can use Zeno button on your opponent's next turn, play out this Goku to counter their attack, and then use your alert gods to keep countering. And it's just a fantastic card. It works really well with the strategy. Now, we only ran 2 in the deck, and honestly, if you want to cut this card, this would probably be one of the first cards I would look to cut because I think it might be a little too cute. There's some games I just never use this card, but there are some games that this card literally just saves the game for me. So again, it's kind of one of those 50-50 cards where, again, if you don't love it, cut it if it doesn't fit your playstyle. But I love this in conjunction with Zeno button, and I love it to help me get rid of some of those bad Goku Blacks that might be in my hand that I can't use. Okay, next up we have the 6-cost Zamasu the Alert God. And this is the 6-cost, 2 blue, 25,000 attacker with Evolve, 3 blue, and 2 on top of a Zamasu. It also has Indestructible, which we talked about, and it has a fantastic auto that I love, probably my favorite Zamasu that's in the game right now. It says, when your opponent's cards attack, if your leader card is Zamasu or Goku Black, you may place 1 card from your hand in the drop area. If you do so, negate that attack and negate the skill and negate this skill for the duration of the turn. And so essentially what happens is when your opponent attacks with a card, you can discard a card out of your hand to negate that attack. Now, something to remember is that this card, this ability, is an auto ability. And the thing I love the most about this card is that you can use it with Zeno button, because that's one of the big downsides with Zeno button is that when you use it, it's a counter. So you don't counter your opponent's attack, you just ready your energy and then your opponent still attacks you. But with this and Zeno button, you can do some really cool stuff where your opponent can attack you with maybe a triple striker. You go, okay, Zeno button, I'll ready up my energy, autos trigger, I'll now discard a card out of my hand and negate that attack. And now for the rest of your opponent's attacks, you have all of your energy ready to go. And it's just a fantastic combo, and it really allows this deck to really survive after tapping out to play its 10-drop threats. So it's just awesome card. I love it. Plus, it's a 25,000 attacker, guys. There's been games where I've played this out on 6 or 5 because you can evolve it if you can play it as a monster earlier, and literally just win the game with it. I'm just like 25 you, 25 you, and just keep going. And it's like they can't deal with this because it's indestructible, or they have to ditch so many cards out of their hand that you just win off of card advantage. So just a very versatile, just a fantastic card. Probably one of the all-stars in the deck. I run 3 in the deck. I did run 4. Honestly, I think it might be okay to go back up to 4. I just love this card so much. The only reason I decided to take it down to 3 was to open up some more slots for some other tech. And also, I just think that sometimes you do have too many of these in your hand. But a lot of times I find myself I never draw this card and think, ah, crap, I got this guy. I draw this card and go, yes, I cannot wait until turn 6 to play this guy. All right, so next up we have the 6-cost, 2 blue, Joyful Strike Goku Black Rose. And this is the promo Goku Black. This comes from the set, the Volume 2 tournament packs. A lot better than I thought he was was going to be. He has double strike, auto. When you play this card, if your leader card is Zamasu or Goku Black, you may inflict 2 damage to your life. If you do so, choose up to 6 of your energy and switch it to active mode. This guy has 25,000 power in double strike. Very scary threat. Now, the great thing about this guy is he's a Goku Black, so he plays very well with your whole combo plan. Like I said, you want a Zamasu, you want a Goku Black on the field, you want to Pator them into the big, scary 10-cost Zamasu, essentially your win condition. And a lot of times what your opponent will do is, well, first we'll talk about why this ability is very good. A lot of times your opponent will want to leave you at 3 life because they don't want you getting value out of Zamasu's ability. So they don't want you to go to 1 life, and if you take 1 life, essentially, so if you take if you're at 3 life and you use Zamasu's ability and then pass turn, they can start pressuring you with double strikers. And so you have to be very careful of the amount of life you leave. And so what you'll have to do sometimes, you have to awaken on 2 life, not to die to double striking, which is not where you want to be. Essentially lose a card that way. And so what Joyful Strike Goku Black Rose allows you to do is kind of break that stalemate, right? You can play him out and then get those 2 life. You do 2 damage to yourself, but you do draw those cards. That's something I wasn't clear about with this card when I reviewed it. I thought those 2 cards actually went to your drop area for some reason. I don't know why I thought that, but they definitely do go to your hand. So essentially, it can really help you break that stall. Something else that can happen is that if you have the perfect start, I guess is what you call it. So you ramp up and then you play on 5, you play your 6 drop. On 7, you play out this guy. So you'll play this guy out. So when I say 6 drop, I'm meaning Alert God, right? So you play Alert God on 6. On your next turn, you play this guy out. You ready your energy, so you're back up to 7. You attack with your Alert God, you attack with your Joyful Strike, and then you play your 10 drop and fuse them together and attack with that. It's just an insane combo. It's very, very good. Now, also, if you are awakened, you can still play this guy out. You can play him out and then mill 10 cards off the top of your deck in order to play this guy the same way to ready your energy, which is sometimes needed. I mean, I haven't done that very often, but if there are some times where I can get value out of him from doing that as well. That's the worst case scenario, but still very good. Also, you can discard this guy to the 4-cost Goku counter card as well because he is a Saiyan, and you can discard him if you don't need him to your Alert Guard Zamasu. So he's just an extremely awesome card, very, very versatile, and I just really like him in the deck. Like I said, he's much better than I thought he would be. Now, I do run 2 in the deck if I didn't say that, and I think that's probably the right number, but if you wanted to increase or decrease it, I probably wouldn't blame you. Like you could probably make an argument for it. So, okay, and now the last battle card we'll talk about is the 10-cost Infinite Force Fuse Zamasu. Now, this is the 10-cost 4 blue 30,000 attacker that has Union Patora, 3 blue and 4, which makes it 7. So that costs 3 less if you Union Patora this guy. He has Indestructible, which is awesome, amazing. Makes this guy a for sure game ender. And then he has an extremely powerful auto ability that says, with this card attacks, choose up to 1 card each from your opponent's battle area. Battle cards only. So you can't choose like a field card or anything like that. Energy, life, hand, and then place them at the bottom of their deck in any order. This guy is an absolute powerhouse. Honestly, is what makes this deck at all playable. If it wasn't for this card, I just really don't think you would have a good enough win condition. And even though you're stalling for a long time, I think your opponent would eventually be able to get there. They'd be able to run you out of cards and kill you. But this guy really puts your opponent on a clock, is what we call it, which means you play this guy out. If they have 3 life left, they have 3 turns to kill you. Well, actually, I guess 2 turns to kill you. And if they don't do that, then they're dead because they cannot kill this guy. So there's no way to stop this guy. He is coming in. And so that's very, very powerful. And a lot of the times, he's still going to do more than that. He's still going to do 2 damage or so too. So essentially when this guy attacks, he takes a life, a card out of their life. He takes a battle card, your choice, from the battle area, 1 of their energy, which is insane, and a card out of their hand. Now, you choose the card out of their hand is what it says in here, but just to clarify this, you don't actually look at their hand and like choose a card and take it. You just like they fan it out or whatever, and then you just take a card out of there. So like that's how that works. It's not, you don't ever get to look at their hand. That was clarified in the FAQ. It's weird that it's worded that way, but I guess it's just the way it was written or whatever. So yeah, very powerful card. Honestly, again, the big cornerstone of this deck. If it wasn't for this guy, like I said, I just don't think this deck would have enough power to win, but this guy's just insane. Very, very, very powerful card. Now, something to remember is this guy is also the reason why a lot of other decks struggle against this. Multi or tri-color decks really struggle against this guy because you can just take away their life. So if they're playing the 3-cost Ginyu deck, Cole Bolas isn't very good against this card. Crusher Ball is not very good against this card. They can't actually kill him. And so once you get to finally attack with this guy, you can just start taking their yellow energy away, or you can start taking their blue energy away, or their green, whatever they're lacking, which is really important. You can also target their active energy with this guy, so you can like make sure they can't counter your other threats you have in the field as well. And so just a very versatile, very powerful battle card that really just makes this deck run. Okay guys, so let's move in to the extra cards. So first up, we run 2 Zeno Button. Now I love this card. I think this card's very good. I think this is one of those cards that kind of blew up when it first came out. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this card's insane. And then it kind of, the hype kind of started dying down a little bit, which I think is absolutely, how it's supposed to be. This isn't an extremely OP card or anything like that. You do have to use this card as a counter attack. And so you do, when you counter with this card, you switch all of your blue energy to active, which is really good for our deck since we're playing mono blue. But you don't get a counter, and you can't play 2 counters. That's another question. You can't use this card and use like a Whisa's Corrosion. You have to essentially, use this as your counter step and just, that's it. That's your counter. But you can use this and then use the Alert God Zamasu like we talked about earlier in the video. Just a very, very strong card, and really lets us tap out at 7, play out our Zamasu, put pressure on our opponent, then use this card on our opponent's turn to make sure that we can protect ourselves and not die. So very, very strong. Next up, we have 4 of the Whisa's Corrosion. This is a 1-cost, 1 blue counterattack. You just get negate the attack and then ready one of your energy. Now this can be any color, just for the card, but we do run mono blue, so obviously we're going to choose a blue energy with this. Very strong card and very important to our strategy. Again, we want to make sure we can live long enough for our opponent to for us just to kill our opponent with the 10-cost card. Next up, we run 2 Sensu Bean. Now I love this card. This is a 1-cost, 1 blue. It says active battle, so you use this as part of your combo, guys. You can use it offensively or defensively. It says choose up to 1 of your cards. It gains plus 5,000 power for the duration of the turn. You choose up to 2 of your energy and switch them to active mode. So you takes 1 energy to use, and then you can ready 2 energy. Very powerful card. Now the reason why we run 2 and not 4 is because essentially this is only a defensive card. We'll never use this card offensively, and so because of that, we will definitely want to kind of, we don't need that many of them, right? We don't want them too early because we're essentially setting up in the early game, and then at the end game, we want to be drawing these and use them to protect ourselves. Now, you can do some fancy stuff with this card where you can essentially objection into a card, and then Sensu Bean your leader attack to ready 2, and then objection again. You can use this offensively, I guess, to open up some cool play lines as well. While that is kind of neat and cute, again, against certain decks that can run you out of cards extremely fast, I always like to say you should never play more than 1 objection unless maybe you miss your Whis. But again, you can still do some fancy stuff with this card, so this card is absolutely fantastic. Just remember that mostly we want to use this card for defense. This is also a great card to use against the token strategies as well. It gives us a way to survive their like alpha strike, and so just a very versatile card, very, very good card. Next up, we run 4 objection. Again, guys, very important that we use it for ramp. If we draw too many of these, we use them as energy, or we ditch them to our Alert God Zamasu in order to counter. So that's another reason why we run 4 of this card. We need an early card, and we need an early card. We need an early game, and this deck has a way to just pitch it out of our hand and make use of it as a counter as well. Okay. Next up, we have 2 Mafuba. Now, this is a card I've underrated. I talked a little bit about it in my Top 5 Tuesday video. Just a fantastic card. It gives us a way to deal with, in the mirror match, it gives us a way to deal with, I guess, opposing indestructible threats. Also, this card, what it does is it lets us negate the attack, and then we place this card on top of our opponent's card. And then at the end of their next turn, they remove this card, the Mafuba card, and then they continue to attack with it, I guess, their following turn after that. Something to remember about this card, a couple rulings for you guys, is that this does stay exhausted, I guess in sleep mode or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, I can't, the name is escaping me. A rest mode, there we go. And so essentially, like if your opponent has attacked with a card, because they have to in order to use this card, you counter the attack. After a Mafuba leaves on their end of their next turn, it does stay in rest mode. And so what that allows us to do is then pressure that card and kill it. And so not only does it turn that card off for 2 turns, it also opens that card up to be attacked. And so, that's something I didn't realize when I first evaluated this card, and this card's just been a powerhouse in the deck. I love it. Now, it is a little hard for us to keep open 2 energy with the way the deck runs. And so, again, this is a fantastic card to use in conjunction with Zeno Button, and just really, just a very versatile, very awesome card. And then our last extra card is Time Ring. Now, this is a 2-cost, 1 blue, active main. Look at the top 10 cards from the top of your deck. Choose up to 1 Goku Black or Zamasu among them. If you have 4 or more energy, you can choose 2 instead. Absolutely awesome card. This is essentially your third 10-drop. Your 10-drop Zamasu, just in case you can't find one by the time you get closer to that that finishing I guess strike. Something else to remember about this card is we can use it to go get our Goku Blacks if we need to. We only run 1 in this deck because honestly, at first I ran 3 of this guy. I was like, man, this card's insane. But what happens a lot in this deck is you just don't need it. You're drawing so many cards. You usually almost always have your combo, and when you draw this card, it just seems a little lackluster. So this card has not performed as well as I thought it would be, and so I cut it from 3 to 2. We ran 2 in the event. John came back to me and was like, the card was okay, I didn't love it, and so we agreed to maybe move it down to 1 and use it as kind of your pseudo third 10-drop Zamasu, or just use it at a pinch to if you need to go get a Goku Black or another Zamasu, a certain Zamasu. Like if you need to go get like your 4-cost kill a guy Zamasu, or go get your Alert God, just gives you those options. Now something to remember about this card is you can choose 2 Goku Black off of this, or you can choose 2 Zamasu off this. You're not limited to have to choose a Goku Black and a Zamasu. I know some people have read it that way. It's absolutely not true. You can choose 2 of each one. It doesn't matter. You just, as long as you get at least 2 cards. Now, we almost always want to use this card on for energy guys, but there might be a time or two maybe where you're in a pinch. You just want to use it on turn 2 when you have nothing else to do. Again, very not suggested to do, but again, the best way to learn a deck and to master a deck is to try different play lines when you're play testing and see how they work out. So definitely try that out. Okay guys, so that's it for this deck profile for the Mono Blue Zamasu Control. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck tech. I love this deck. It's actually been one of my favorite decks. Before I get off here, I want to kind of do a brief summary on the deck. One of the main things to remember about this deck, what you're wanting to do with this deck, guys, is you're wanting to ramp. So you're wanting to start out on your first turn, you're wanting to use those Bulmas, try to find your Whis, use Objection on turn 2, on turn 3 use Whis, and then just snowball into, make sure you get a Zamasu out and you get a Goku Black out. Use those 2 cards to Unipatora into your 10-drop Zamasu, and then use that guy to put a clock on your opponent to eventually win the game. Some things that you will be struggling with this deck is be very careful with the 7-drop Zenusama card. It can deal with your threats, and so just be really careful when you play that card out. Other than that, it actually has a pretty good matchup against most things. I've noticed that Goku Black is just a little bit faster than this deck, and I've really struggled to really beat Goku Black decks because they can get their Goku Black out before I can get my Zamasu out, and they can take 3 of my energy away and essentially stop me from doing the Unipatora. So that's a pretty bad matchup. But what I will say about this deck, guys, is I think that Goku Black is very good against this deck, but I think this deck is very good against everything else. And so while I do think you have a pretty bad matchup against Goku Black, I think your matchup against all the other decks is way better, and I don't think Goku Black, for my current builds I've seen, will be a tier 1 deck, where I think this deck definitely has the potential to be a tier 1 deck. You're very good against Cell, you're very good against aggressive decks, and honestly it does not have that many bad matchups. You just want to make sure, guys, again, that you keep track of where your 10 drops at. That's the last thing I'll tell you guys before I leave here. Use your Bulmas, use anything like your Gawasus, anything to let you look at your deck and get as much information at your deck as you can, and just really figure out where those 10-cost Zamasus are. If they're both in your life, you want to not use your life, your ability to essentially cycle your life, because you don't want it to discard that's a 10-drop. It's pivotal into winning the game. Something else to remember, guys, the last thing I'll talk about is make sure you get down to 1 life. Get as close to 1 life as you can before you awaken. It's very, very important. It really helps you with that card advantage going into the late game. So guys, thank you so much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you guys have any questions about the deck, make sure you let me know in the comment section below. I will be uploading some Octagon videos of me playing this deck on the channel starting next week. It's a new series I'll be doing, which I'm really excited to do. I'm going to try to have an Octagon video up every day of the week for you guys to check out, and I'll be mainly playing this deck for the first round, just so you guys can get an idea how to play it. If you guys again have any questions, any comments, let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.